It was supposed to be the kind of morning that disappears into memory, a swirl of tired travelers, rolling bags, and the soft hum of airport life. But at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, where hundreds of flights lift off every hour, something was about to happen that would never be forgotten. Before we get into what really went on at that checkpoint, take a second, pause, breathe, and get ready for a true story that's equal parts mystery and emotion. If you believe in the kind of moments that change everything, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop your country in the comments. Because this story, the story of a suitcase, a dog, and the secret that stopped an entire terminal, is one you'll want to remember. The morning haze over Atlanta was thinning as sunlight bounced off the wide windows of Terminal C. Flights to New York, Dallas, Chicago, Denver flashed across the giant screens. People rushed past security lines, balancing coffees too full and patience too thin. A child cried somewhere behind the barrier, and an announcement about delayed boarding for Gate C-14 echoed in the distance. The air smelled of disinfectant and roasted beans. Officer Thomas Wells adjusted the cuff of his uniform, pushing back the fatigue that had become his closest companion. He had been on the job 17 years, most of them in the airport K-9 division. To strangers, he was all quiet authority, a man who handled emergencies with the calm precision of someone who had seen too much and expected more to come. But under that uniform lived a weight he rarely acknowledged. 3 years earlier, his wife Claire had died in a car crash on her way to visit his station. The other driver was an off-duty air traffic controller who had fallen asleep at the wheel after a double shift. Since the funeral, Thomas had buried himself in work, trading weekends for overtime and conversation for silence. His only constant was Rex, a black German shepherd whose loyalty had stitched his fractured life into something that merely resembled normal. That morning, Thomas brushed a hand over Rex's head as they stood by the baggage scanner. "Routine, sweet partner," he murmured, knowing well that Rex didn't need telling. The dog's ears were up, eyes sharp, tail still, a soldier at ease yet ready for command. The crowd thickened as a new flight from Miami emptied into the arrivals area. Among those stepping into line for rescreening was a young man in a gray hoodie and faded jeans, pushing a single brown suitcase. There was nothing remarkable about him, no hurried steps or nervous glances. Yet the suitcase drew attention in its silence. Most luggage bore destination tags, airport stickers, or scuff patterns from conveyor belts. This one was smooth, polished, intentional. A deep diagonal scratch marred one corner, as if someone had tried to sand off a number. Thomas might have overlooked him if not for Rex. The dog froze mid-step. His nose twitched, his shoulders went rigid. His gaze locked on the suitcase. Then came a low guttural growl that cut through the chatter of nearby travelers like a sharp note. Thomas flinched, turning his full focus on the dog. In his years with the unit, he'd learned to interpret Rex's every twitch. This was new. Not the alert for narcotics. Not the sniffer's dance of discovering explosives. This was hesitation. Like something inside that suitcase disturbed the dog's sense of order. "What is it, boy?" Thomas whispered, crouching slightly. Rex didn't move. His body was drawn forward by invisible gravity, muscles tense, breathing short. Passengers began noticing. A mother pulled her toddler closer. A businessman muttered about missing his flight. The young man with the suitcase looked over his shoulder nervously, his right hand tightening around the handle. Thomas raised his voice, steady but authoritative. "Sir, can you step aside for a quick inspection?" The man blinked. "Is there a problem?" His accent sounded East Coast, clipped and precise. "Routine check," Thomas replied. He gestured toward the quiet corner near the scanner table. "Dogs alerting on your bag." I don't understand," the man stammered. "It's just clothes." "Then it'll be quick." For a long moment, the traveler didn't move. The hum of the airport faded to a strange stillness. Thomas could feel eyes on them, dozens of cell phones subtly tilted, ready to record drama. Finally, the man sighed, swallowed hard, and guided the suitcase toward the table. His movements were careful, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Rex followed, tail stiff, nails tapping against the tile floor with tense rhythm. Thomas's instinct screamed that something was wrong, though the rational side of his mind reminded him that 99% of alerts ended in nothing more than strange perfume or residual cleaning chemicals. He unzipped the outer pocket first. Standard items spilled out: passport, boarding pass, a paperback book about photojournalism. The man's name, Elliot Carver, age 25, flight to Denver. Nothing suspicious. But Rex's focus didn't shift. The dog began pacing, circling the table, sniffing the air above the suitcase before sitting abruptly, a signal he used for confirmed detection. Thomas exchanged a look with the TSA agent beside him. "Run it through the scanner." The suitcase slid into the machine, black and white shapes appearing on the screen. At first glance, everything seemed normal: shirts, folded jackets, electronic cords. Then a rectangular object caught the operator's eye. Thin, dense, placed flat against the lower lining. "What's that?" the agent asked. "Hard to tell." Thomas leaned closer. "Maybe a book?" The machine gave no irregular heat signature, no bomb, no device. Yet Rex continued to rumble, as if warning them to keep their distance. Thomas turned to the passenger. "Sir, what's in that lower compartment?" The young man licked his lips. "Just an old photo album." His hands trembled before he shoved them into his pockets. "Mind if we take a look?" "You don't have to," he stopped halfway. "Please, just be careful with it." There was a note in his voice that Thomas recognized immediately, fear mixed with grief, the trembling edge of someone standing between truth and collapse. For a moment, compassion warred with procedure. Then duty won. He put on gloves and opened the zipper fully. The scent hit first, a faint metallic tang, like blood on a rusted key. Inside, beneath neatly folded shirts, lay a black hardcover book wrapped with duct tape around its edges. Thomas lifted it out carefully and set it on the table. The young man's hands twitched forward instinctively, but Rex's low growl stopped him cold. "What's in there?" Thomas pressed. "Please," Elliot murmured. "I can explain later. Just don't open it here." Thomas unclipped a utility knife and sliced through the tape. The sound echoed sharper than it should have. Under the fluorescent lights, dust shimmered around them like falling ash. He flipped the cover and froze. Inside were old-fashioned Polaroid photographs, perfectly arranged, each labeled with dates and airport codes. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them. The people captured in the images were asleep, slumped in waiting chairs, sprawled across benches, heads leaned against windows. Men, women, even children. Their faces looked peaceful, almost unnaturally so. Thomas turned one over. On the back, written in neat, deliberate ink, ATL, Gate C14, 09/18, 7:25 a.m. His watch read 7:45. 20 minutes difference. A chill climbed his spine. That was this terminal. "Who are these people?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. The young man didn't answer. Rex suddenly backed up, every hair on his neck bristling, staring not at the suitcase anymore, but at the man's chest, as if he'd found a deeper source of danger altogether. Thomas felt the pull of every pair of watching eyes, the muffled gasp of someone behind the barricade, the static creeping into his radio. Somewhere near Gate C14, an announcement stuttered, the speakers crackled, words cutting out mid-sentence. Thomas tried again. "Sir, I need to know what this is." The man finally met his gaze. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," he said quietly. "But if we don't move fast, none of us are leaving this airport." Rex barked once, sharp as gunfire, cutting through the stagnant air. And that's when the entire lights above them flickered, once, twice, before plunging half the terminal into shadow. Thomas's reflexes kicked in, his hand darted toward his radio. But before he could call it in, a single piercing sound filled the silence. Ping. An alert tone from the intercom echoed across the darkened hall. "Security notice. Unidentified baggage detected at Gate C14. The same gate. The same code on the photo. Thomas's breath caught in his throat. The dog barked again, desperate, dragging him forward toward the direction of the gate. The young man whispered, "It's already started." And with those words hanging in the air, the scene froze, the crowd, the noise, the shadows. Thomas looked down at the half-open suitcase, the eerie photographs glinting under emergency lights, and realized that whatever secret was buried inside that bag wasn't finished with him yet. The story of what waited beyond Gate C14 was only beginning. The emergency lights cast long shadows across Terminal C as Thomas grabbed his radio. "Wells to dispatch. Confirm that unidentified baggage alert at Gate C14. I'm en route now." He gestured to two nearby TSA agents. "Secure this suitcase and this man. Nobody touches anything until I get back." Elliot Carver's eyes widened. "Officer, you can't leave me here. Please, you need to understand what's happening." Thomas hesitated, hand on his holster. The desperation in the young man's voice was real, too real to ignore. "Talk fast. Those photos aren't just pictures. They're warnings." Elliot's voice dropped to a whisper. Every person in that album fell asleep in an airport and never woke up again. A chill crawled up Thomas's spine. Rex growled, low and persistent, pulling toward gate C-14. "Officer Wells, we need you at the gate," crackled his radio. "Now." Thomas made a split-second decision. "You're coming with me," he said, gripping Elliot's arm. "And bringing that." He nodded at the photo album. They moved swiftly through the dim terminal, Rex leading the way. Travelers pressed against the walls, confusion and fear etched on their faces. Airport security was redirecting people away from gate C-14, where a perimeter had already formed. "How many photos are in that album?" Thomas asked as they approached. 47, Elliot replied. "My mother collected them. She said they were evidence." "Evidence of what?" "She wouldn't tell me. Just said it was happening across major airports. She worked at the Rutherford Institute in New Mexico. Bioresearch Division." Thomas slowed his pace. "The Government Research Center?" "Yes. She called me last week, terrified. Said she'd mail me something important, that I needed to get it to Washington. Then she disappeared." Elliot's voice broke. "The suitcase arrived yesterday. I didn't know what was inside until this morning." At gate C-14, Officer Sandra Mills, head of airport security, stood beside the bomb squad. Her eyes narrowed when she saw Thomas with Elliot and the album. "Wells, what's this? Who authorized a civilian in the containment zone?" "He's connected to what's happening," Thomas replied. "His suitcase, the one Rex alerted on, it's full of photos just like this." He handed her the Polaroid labeled with gate C-14. Mills studied it, brow furrowed. "This was taken this morning? How?" "That's what we need to find out." At the center of the perimeter sat a carry-on bag nearly identical to Elliot's. Same model, same color, same distinctive scratch down the side. The bomb squad technician approached, suit bulky and movements precise. "Scanner shows no explosives," he reported. "But there's something unusual inside. Object with wiring, looks like it might be electronic." Thomas turned to Elliot. "You recognize that bag?" The young man's face drained of color. "It's exactly like the one my mother sent. Same scratch and everything." "Open it," Mills ordered. The technician used a remote device, carefully lifting the lid. Inside, neatly packed clothes surrounded a small black device with a digital display, a timer, counting down from 9 minutes. "Is it a bomb?" someone whispered. "No explosive components detected," the technician replied. "But it's emitting something. My sensors are picking up an unusual gas signature. Very faint." Elliot stepped back, bumping into a wall. "The sleeping trial," he murmured. Thomas turned. "What did you just say?" "That's what my mother called it. Project Hypnos. The sleeping trial." Rex suddenly tensed beside Thomas, ears forward, attention locked on the device. He didn't growl or bark, instead he whimpered, pawing at his own nose. "Everyone back." Thomas shouted, grabbing Rex's collar. "That's not just a timer, it's a dispersal device." As security began widening the perimeter, Thomas noticed something else in the suitcase, a mesh pocket on the inside lid, just like Elliot's. He reached for it, ignoring protocol. "Sir, we need to wait for the hazmat team," the technician protested. But Thomas had already found what he was looking for, a small USB drive taped to the lining. Identical to the one now visible in Elliot's open suitcase back at the checkpoint. "This is no coincidence," he muttered, pocketing the drive. Mills ordered the terminal evacuated, but Thomas hesitated. "We need to see what's on these drives first." They rushed to the security office, leaving the containment team with the device. Inside, Thomas plugged the USB into a computer while Mills called for reinforcements. The drive contained dozens of video files, each named with a date and location. Thomas clicked on one labeled DFW06-12 and watched as airport surveillance footage showed a middle-aged woman slumping forward in her seat at Dallas-Fort Worth International. Medical teams rushed in, but her vitals were already dropping. The footage had been edited to show her face alongside a medical chart, blood work, brain activity, all flatlined within minutes. "They're all the same," Elliot said, voice trembling as Thomas opened more files. "Different people, different airports, same result." "What exactly did your mother do at Rutherford?" Thomas demanded. Elliot's hands shook. "Neurochemical research. Sleep disorders. They were developing a treatment for PTSD, a compound that could erase traumatic memories during deep sleep." He swallowed hard. "She said they'd twisted it, turned it into something else. A weapon. A weapon that puts people to sleep permanently," Mills concluded, face grim. Thomas turned back to the screen, opening the most recent file. The timestamp showed footage from just that morning, a man in a gray coat positioning the second suitcase near gate C14, then walking away. When he turned briefly toward the camera, Thomas felt his blood freeze. The man looked exactly like Elliot. "That's not possible," Elliot whispered, backing away from the screen. "That's not me. I was on a flight from Denver when that was recorded." Thomas's hand moved to his holster. "Then who is it?" Before Elliot could answer, Rex began barking frantically, lunging toward the door. Mills's radio crackled. "Containment team to security." The device timer just accelerated. 4 minutes remaining. Thomas grabbed Elliot's arm. "If that's not you, then who is it? Who else knew about these photos?" "Nobody. Just my mother and—" Elliot stopped, face contorting in horror. "Oh God. The backup." "What backup?" "She said if anything happened to her, there was a backup. Someone who looked exactly like—" His voice trailed off as understanding dawned. The overhead lights flickered again. Then came the sound of airlocks engaging, the airport's emergency containment system, designed to isolate sections during a terror threat. "We're being sealed in," Mills realized. Thomas's phone buzzed with an incoming text. The number was unknown, but the message chilled him to the core. "Open the second album. The real one." He looked at Elliot, then at the photo album on the desk. With trembling fingers, he flipped it open again, this time turning to the very back page that he hadn't examined before. Taped inside was a single Polaroid unlike the others. Not of a sleeping person, but of a lab. In the center stood a woman in a white coat, presumably Elliot's mother, beside what looked like medical incubation chambers. Inside each chamber was a face, eyes closed, perfectly still. And one of them wore Elliot's face. Thomas's hand jerked away from the album as if it had burned him. The photograph showed 5 identical faces, all Elliot Carver, floating in what looked like medical suspension chambers. Each tank was labeled with a number, Elliot 1 through Elliot 5. "What the hell is this?" Thomas demanded, voice barely above a whisper. The Elliot standing before him backed against the wall, shaking his head. I don't understand. That's not possible." Mills drew her weapon. "Don't move." "Please," Elliot pleaded, raising his hands. "I'm not whatever you think I am. I'm Ellen Carver's son. I grew up in Boulder. I have memories, a life." "Which one are you?" Thomas interrupted, pointing at the photograph. "Which number?" Elliot's face crumpled. "I don't know what you're talking about. My mother was a research scientist, yes, but she couldn't have." Rex growled, circling Elliot with hackles raised. The dog's instincts had been right from the beginning. Thomas glanced at the timer on his watch. 3 minutes until the device activated. He made a decision and grabbed the USB drive. "Mills, evacuate the terminal. I'm going to the control center to access the mainframe. We need to see everything on this drive." "What about him?" Mills nodded toward Elliot. "He's coming with me. If he's telling the truth, he'll help. If not—" Thomas let the implication hang. They rushed through emergency corridors, Rex leading the way. The airport central control room was located beneath the main terminal, a fortified space designed to function during any catastrophe. Two armed guards stepped aside as Mills flashed her credentials. Inside, wall-to-wall screens displayed every corner of the airport. Thomas plugged the drive into the main system, while Mills coordinated the evacuation through her radio. Elliot stood frozen, staring at the security feeds. "There," he suddenly said, pointing at one screen. "Gate C-22. That's me." Thomas looked up. The camera showed another Elliot Carver, identical down to the clothes, calmly walking through the emptying terminal, heading toward an emergency exit. 2 minutes to device activation, an automated voice announced over the speakers. Thomas pulled up the USB contents on the main screen. Dozens of files appeared, not just videos, but research documents, molecular formulas, and a folder labeled Project Hypnos, Phase 3. He clicked it open. The first document was a research summary. Subject tissue successfully replicated with memory implantation. 5 viable duplicates achieved with 97.8% cognitive mapping. Field test authorization granted by Director Holloway. First deployment, Atlanta. "They're using clones as couriers," Thomas said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "Your mother wasn't just documenting the sleeping incidents, she was part of creating them." "No," Elliot insisted. "She was trying to expose it. That's why she sent me the evidence." "Or she sent it to the version of you she trusted," Thomas countered. "Maybe she didn't know which one you were either." The molecular formulas on screen shifted as Thomas opened more files. Complex chains of compounds with notes attached. Aerosolized delivery successful. Compound binds to specific neural receptors, triggering immediate REM sleep followed by systematic shutdown of autonomous functions. Undetectable in standard toxicology. Classified as natural causes. Mills pointed to a map that had appeared on another screen. "Look at this. Every red is an incident. Chicago, Dallas, Miami, Denver. They've been testing this for months." "But why airports?" Thomas wondered aloud. Rex suddenly barked, drawing their attention to a security feed showing the device at Gate C-14. The countdown had accelerated again, 60 seconds remaining. "We need to seal off the air systems." Mills shouted into her radio. "Too late," came the response. "Whatever it's releasing is already in the ventilation." Thomas turned to Elliot, who had gone deathly pale. "What happens when it reaches 0? "I don't know," Elliot whispered. "But if my mother sent me here with this evidence, there must be a way to stop it." Thomas frantically searched through more files until he found one labeled Override. Inside was a simple text document with a series of commands and a note, Emergency Shutdown Sequence. Use only as last resort. "This could disable the device," Thomas said, typing the commands into the terminal. "Or trigger it immediately," Mills warned. 40 seconds. Thomas's fingers flew across the keyboard. The system asked for authentication, a 6-digit code he didn't have. "Think," he demanded of Elliot. "What would your mother use as a code?" Elliot closed his eyes. "Try 072215. "What is that?" "My birthday. At least, the birthday I remember." Thomas entered the numbers. "Access denied" flashed on screen. 30 seconds. "Wait," Elliot said, a strange look crossing his face. The photo in the album. Each chamber had a date beneath it. He grabbed the album, flipping to the back page. "Try 051422, the date under the first chamber." Thomas entered it. The screen changed. Override initiated. "Confirm?" 20 seconds. He hit confirm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then on the security feed, the device at Gate C-14 flickered, its timer frozen at 18 seconds. "It worked," Mills breathed. But their relief was short-lived. On another screen, a new alert appeared. 3 more devices had been detected throughout the airport, all suddenly activated. "This isn't over," Thomas said grimly. "Someone's watching us." They knew we'd find the override. Rex's ears perked up. The dog turned toward the control room door, growling low in his throat. "What is it, boy?" Thomas asked, reaching for his weapon. The security feed from the hallway outside showed a figure approaching, another Elliot, this one wearing a maintenance uniform and carrying a metal case. "That's not me," their Elliot whispered, backing away from the door. The radio crackled with static, then a woman's voice broke through, calm, clinical, precise. "Thomas Wells. I see you've met my son. Or rather, one version of him." Thomas grabbed the radio. "Who is this?" "Dr. Ellen Carver. The real Ellen Carver. And I'm afraid you've just made a terrible mistake." "We stopped your device," Thomas countered. A soft laugh came through the speaker. "No, Officer Wells. You just armed it." On the security feeds, dozens of travelers who hadn't yet evacuated suddenly stopped moving. In the food court, at baggage claim, in restrooms, people began to sway, then slump forward in their seats or collapse to the floor. "What have you done?" Thomas demanded. "Created a solution," Dr. Carver replied. "The sleeping trial was never about putting people to sleep. It was about controlling who wakes up." The Elliot in the maintenance uniform had reached the control room door. Through the window, Thomas could see his face, identical to their Elliot's, yet somehow harder, more focused. "Only one of my sons knows the truth," Dr. Carver continued. "The others believe what they were programmed to believe. I needed to be certain the evidence reached the right people." "Which one am I?" their Elliot asked, voice breaking. "Please, which one am I?" The radio fell silent for a moment. "Then, you're the one who remembered the correct birthday, aren't you? Ask yourself what that means." Rex suddenly charged at their Elliot, knocking him to the ground. Something fell from his pocket, a small metal cylinder no bigger than a pen. "Get back!" Thomas shouted, pulling Mills away. Their Elliot looked up, eyes suddenly cold and precise. "I had to be sure you'd find the override sequence. Mother will be so pleased." The door burst open. The maintenance-uniformed Elliot rushed in, tackling his duplicate. "He's not me," he shouted. "He's been activated." Thomas aimed his weapon, unable to tell which Elliot was which. Both men wrestled on the floor, identical in every way except their clothes. "Stop or I'll shoot," Thomas commanded. One Elliot grabbed the cylinder. "You don't understand what's coming," he said, voice eerily calm. "This is just the beginning." Mills lunged forward, trying to seize the cylinder, but she was too late. The cap twisted with a soft click, and white mist began filling the room. Rex barked frantically, pulling at Thomas's uniform, trying to drag him toward the door. "Gas!" Mills cried, covering her face. Thomas felt his limbs growing heavy, his eyelids drooping. The security feeds around them showed more people collapsing throughout the airport, an epidemic of sudden sleep. Through blurring vision, he saw both Elliot still struggling, neither seemingly affected by the gas. One reached into his pocket and pressed something into Thomas's hand, a small plastic injector. "Use it," he gasped. "It's the antidote. My mother, the real Ellen. She wants you to know." His words faded as Thomas's consciousness began to slip away. The injector felt heavy in his palm. One dose. 3 people in the room. The last thing Thomas saw before darkness took him was the security feed of Gate C-14, where the timer had started counting down again, this time backward from 0. It wasn't stopping. It was beginning. Consciousness returned to Thomas in painful fragments. First sound, then sensation, finally sight. His mouth tasted like copper pennies. His lungs burned. Somewhere close, Rex was barking, the sound muffled as if underwater. The injector lay empty in his palm. He'd used it on himself. Thomas jerked upright, the room spinning around him. Mills lay motionless on the floor, her chest barely rising. Both Elliots were gone. The security monitors showed a terminal frozen in chaos. Dozens of bodies slumped in chairs, sprawled across floors, draped over counters. Not dead, but locked in whatever artificial slumber the gas had induced. "Mills," he gasped, crawling to her side. No response. Her pulse fluttered weakly beneath his fingertips. Rex nudged his arm, whining urgently. The dog seemed unaffected by the gas. Perhaps his metabolism processed it differently, or perhaps he'd been engineered to resist it. Thomas couldn't be sure of anything anymore. His radio crackled. "Officer Wells," came Dr. Carver's voice again, "I see you made your choice." Thomas grabbed it, rage clearing his mind. "What have you done to these people?" "Given them peace," she replied. "The sleep is temporary, for most of them. The Rutherford Institute has been perfecting this technology for years. Imagine, controlled neurological shutdown, selective memory erasure, perfect compliance upon waking. You're experimenting on innocent travelers, Thomas snarled. We're saving humanity from itself, Dr. Carver countered. My son should have explained that much to you by now. The one who left you the antidote, did you use it wisely? Thomas looked down at Mills, guilt crushing his chest. He'd chosen himself. I needed you conscious, Officer Wells, Dr. Carver continued, as if reading his thoughts. You have something I want. The USB drive? No. Something far more valuable. Something only you can access. The control room door opened. Standing there was an Elliot, impossible to tell which one. He wore the maintenance uniform but carried himself differently now, shoulders squared, eyes sharp and clinical. You should have let me die with the others, Thomas said, rising unsteadily to his feet. Elliot smiled thinly. Mother needs you. Your biometric clearance is required to access certain restricted areas of the airport. What restricted areas? The CDC Secure Containment Lab beneath Terminal E. Thomas's blood ran cold. Atlanta's airport housed one of the CDC's auxiliary biocontainment facilities, a fact known to few outside high-level security. It was designed to safely receive and temporarily store dangerous pathogens being transported to the main CDC headquarters. How do you know about that? Thomas demanded. Mother told me, Elliot replied, gesturing with a pistol. The Rutherford Institute has been working with CDC assets for years. Project Hypnos was just the beginning. Thomas glanced at the security feeds. The entire airport appeared deserted now, except for a single screen showing Gate E42, where a woman in a white lab coat stood calmly among the sleeping bodies, checking her watch. Dr. Ellen Carver. In person. Why Atlanta? Thomas asked, playing for time as he edged closer to his own weapon, which had fallen nearby. Because Atlanta's CDC connection makes it the perfect distribution node, Elliot explained. Once we secure the containment lab, the compound can be modified and shipped to every major airport in the country within 24 hours. Rex growled low, sensing Thomas's tension. Elliot noticed and aimed the gun at the dog. Call him off, or I'll put him to sleep permanently. Thomas whistled softly. Easy, Rex. Now move, Elliot ordered. Terminal E, Mother is waiting. As they left the control room, Thomas cast one last glance at Mills. Her breathing had stabilized, but her eyes remained closed. She'll wake in a few hours, Elliot said dismissively. Mother's first-generation compound is temporary. The next version won't be. They moved through the silent airport, a grotesque still life of interrupted journeys. Travelers lay where they had fallen, businessmen clutching briefcases, mothers with arms still wrapped protectively around children, a pilot slumped beside his rolling luggage. Why are you doing this? Thomas asked as they approached Terminal E. What's the endgame? Elliot's face remained impassive. War has evolved, Officer Wells. Nations no longer need to drop bombs when they can simply put their enemies to sleep. Selective awakening means workforce preservation, resource conservation, efficient population management. You're talking about mass murder. We're talking about species survival, Elliot countered. Earth has finite resources. Humanity has infinite appetite. They reached Terminal E's security checkpoint. A dead zone in the cameras allowed Thomas a moment's opportunity. He lunged suddenly, striking Elliot's wrist. The gun clattered across the floor. Rex sprang forward, teeth bared. Elliot didn't flinch. Instead, he pressed a device on his wrist, emitting a high-pitched tone that made Rex yelp and back away, disoriented. Sonic deterrent, Elliot explained, retrieving the weapon. We planned for everything. Behind the security desk lay a keypad that Thomas had never noticed before. Elliot gestured toward it. Your handprint. Now. And if I refuse? Then Mother activates the timers on all remaining devices. The concentration increases tenfold. Everyone in this airport, including your partner Mills, never wakes up. Thomas reluctantly pressed his palm against the scanner. The wall beside them slid open, revealing a sterile corridor leading downward. LED lights flickered on automatically, illuminating their path. Mother will be pleased, Elliot said, pushing Thomas forward. They descended 3 levels. The air grew colder, charged with a sterile burn of industrial disinfectants. At the bottom, a reinforced door bore the CDC logo and a biohazard symbol. Dr. Ellen Carver waited, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her lab coat pristine. Beside her stood another Elliot, identical to the one escorting Thomas. Officer Wells, she greeted him, voice matching the one from the radio. Thank you for joining us. Doesn't seem like I had much choice, Thomas replied, eyes darting between the 2 identical men. Dr. Carver noticed his confusion. Don't worry about telling them apart. They're both me, in a manner of speaking. 2 different aspects of the same solution. You cloned your own son. I improved upon him, she corrected. Elliot's 3 and 4 have enhanced cognitive function, reduced emotional interference, and perfect recall. They feel no pain, require minimal sleep, and follow instructions precisely. The Elliot who had escorted Thomas stepped forward, handing Dr. Carver the gun. He attempted resistance, Mother. As expected, she replied. Predictability is such a human trait. Thomas glanced around, assessing his options. The corridor offered no escape. Rex stood beside him, alert but awaiting command. What do you want from me? Thomas asked. Your final biometric authorization, Dr. Carver replied, gesturing to the reinforced door. The CDC containment lab houses the component we need to perfect the compound, a specialized prion protein that, when synthesized with our formula, creates irreversible neural binding. Permanent sleep, Thomas translated. Precisely. She smiled thinly. Your handprint, voice authorization, and retinal scan are the last barriers. After that, the next phase begins. As Thomas weighed his rapidly diminishing options, an alarm suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lights pulsed along the corridor. Dr. Carver frowned, turning to one of the Elliots. Check the surveillance. The clone produced a tablet, swiping through security feeds. His expression hardened. Impossible. What is it? Dr. Carver demanded. Gate C14, he replied, turning the tablet toward her. The original device, it's been modified. Thomas glimpsed the screen. The device they had thought disabled was now pulsing with blue light instead of red, its display counting rapidly upward instead of down. Someone's reversed the compound, Dr. Carver whispered, her composure cracking. They're waking everyone up. The second Elliot grabbed the tablet. There's someone at the control panel. It looks like, he stopped, confusion crossing his face. Like what? Dr. Carver snapped. Like me. Thomas felt a surge of hope. A third Elliot, perhaps the real one, the one who had given him the antidote. Dr. Carver's face hardened. Elliot, 2 has betrayed us. Activate emergency protocol. Release the final compound. But Mother, the formula isn't stabilized. Do it, she hissed, turning back to Thomas. Open this door now, or everyone in this airport dies. As she spoke, Thomas noticed something on her lab coat, a small identification badge partially hidden beneath her collar. It read, Rutherford Institute, Special Projects. Dr. Claire Wells, Director. Claire Wells. His wife's name. Thomas stared, the world tilting beneath him. That's not possible. Dr. Carver, or whoever she really was, smiled coldly. Did you really think your wife died in that car accident 3 years ago, Thomas? The grief has made you blind to what was right in front of you. She reached up, touching her face. Something shifted beneath her fingers, a nearly invisible seam along her jawline, the edge of a mask so perfect it was indistinguishable from real skin. It's time you learned what really happened to Claire, she said, beginning to peel back her face. And why I chose you to be here today. Thomas stared at the woman he had buried 3 years ago, his world collapsing around him like a house of cards in a windstorm. The mask peeled away inch by inch, revealing familiar features beneath, the same features he'd kissed goodbye on that last morning, the face he'd seen in endless nightmares since. Claire Wells. How, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the blaring alarms. She smiled, not the warm smile he remembered, but something clinical and cold. The accident was real, Thomas. The driver did fall asleep. But I wasn't declared dead because I was dead. I was declared dead because it was convenient. Convenient for who? For the Rutherford Institute. They needed someone with my expertise in neurochemical research, someone who could disappear completely into the program. The two Elliot clones moved with mechanical precision, typing commands into tablets and securing the corridor as the alarm continued to pulse in waves of sound and light. Through the chaos, Thomas's mind struggled to process the betrayal unfolding before him. "You abandoned me," he said, each word heavy as stone. "For what?" "To create weapons." "To save humanity from itself," Claire replied, fully removing the mask to reveal her face, older, harder, but unmistakably hers. "The sleeping trial isn't just about control, Thomas. It's about selection. About choosing who remains conscious to shepherd our species through what comes next." Above them, the security feed showed the third Elliot, the one Claire had called Elliot 2, working frantically at the device in Gate C14. People throughout the terminal were beginning to stir, eyelids fluttering as the counteragent spread through the ventilation system. "You need to make a choice," Claire said, gesturing to the CDC door. "Open it and help us perfect the final compound, or watch everyone in this airport, including yourself, fall into permanent sleep when my sons release the emergency protocol." Thomas looked at the security feed, at Mills still unconscious on the control room floor, at the families beginning to wake. Then at Rex, loyal and alert beside him. "There was a time I would have followed you anywhere," Thomas said quietly. "Even now, part of me wants to believe there's a reason, some greater good that justifies this." "There is," Claire insisted. "The world is dying, Thomas. Resources dwindling, climate collapsing, wars brewing over what remains. The sleeping trial gives us control over consumption, over population, over who uses what little time Earth has left." The Elliots exchanged glances. One spoke, "Mother Elliot 2 has activated the main air circulation. The counteragent is spreading to all terminals." Claire's face hardened. "Release the emergency compound. Now." "Wait," Thomas said, stepping forward. "If I open that door for you, do you give me your word that you'll stop this? That you'll let these people go?" Claire studied him, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. "For you, Thomas, yes. They can have time. Not forever, but today." Thomas placed his palm on the scanner beside the reinforced door. A green light passed over his hand. "Voice authorization required," the system announced. "Thomas Wells, Airport Security, code Epsilon 93. Retinal scan required for final clearance." He leaned forward, allowing the red beam to pass over his eye. The door hissed, pressure equalizing as the seal broke. Claire smiled. "You always did believe in me," she said, triumph coloring her voice. "I believed in my wife," Thomas replied quietly. "The woman who spent weekends volunteering at animal shelters. Who cried during sad movies. Who couldn't kill spiders, so she caught them in cups and released them outside." The door swung open, revealing a sterile laboratory filled with containment chambers. In the center stood a single isolation unit containing a small vial of cloudy liquid suspended in an electromagnetic field. "The prion protein," Claire whispered reverently. "With this, the compound becomes irreversible." She stepped forward, but Thomas didn't move. One of the Elliots pushed him roughly from behind. "Keep going," the clone ordered. Thomas locked eyes with Claire. "You know what Rex's command for attack is? It's the same word you chose for him when we first got him as a puppy." Claire froze, sudden understanding crossing her face. "Sunflower," Thomas whispered. Rex launched forward with explosive force, targeting not Claire but the tablet in the nearest Elliot's hands, the control for the emergency protocol. The clone staggered back as razor teeth clamped down, the device clattering to the floor and skidding across the polished surface. Thomas dove for it, rolling beneath a lab table as the second Elliot fired his weapon. The bullet shattered glass containers above, raining chemicals and shards downward. Claire screamed for them to stop, to preserve the laboratory, but chaos had already taken hold. Rex pivoted, a blur of black fur and focused rage, leaping at the armed clone and knocking him backward into a rack of equipment. Thomas grabbed the tablet, fingers flying across the cracked screen to access the emergency protocol. "Override code," he muttered, searching desperately through options. Claire lunged for him, her face contorted with fury. "You don't understand what you're doing. This is bigger than us, bigger than these people. This is about the future of humanity. No, Thomas countered, finding the command sequence. This is about right now. About these people. About choices. He hit the final key just as alarms changed pitch. The emergency protocol cancelled. On the security feed above, the people throughout the terminal were sitting up, disoriented but alive. The counteragent was working. Claire stumbled back, her expression shifting from rage to something more complex. For just a moment, Thomas caught a glimpse of the woman he had loved, confused, lost, broken. "You've doomed them to a dying world," she whispered. "I've given them a choice," he replied. The laboratory's emergency system suddenly engaged, containment breach protocols activating with mechanical precision. Steel shutters began descending over the entrance. "We need to get out," Thomas called to Rex, who had pinned one of the Elliots to the ground. "Now." He rolled beneath the descending shutter, Rex following with athletic grace. The doors slammed shut with Claire and the clones still inside. Through the narrowing gap, he caught a final glimpse of his wife's eyes, no longer cold, but filled with a terrible sadness. "This isn't over, Thomas," she called as the barrier sealed. "It's just beginning." The emergency decontamination sequence engaged, filling the laboratory with sterilizing mist. Through the small reinforced window, Thomas watched as Claire calmly reached for the isolation unit containing the prion protein. She had seconds before the full lockdown would trap her for hours. But instead of grabbing the vial, she turned back to Thomas and mouthed something he couldn't hear through the thick barrier. The same words she'd said the last morning before the accident. "I'll see you tonight." Then she pressed a button on her wrist device, and the lights inside the lab went dark. When emergency power engaged seconds later, the laboratory was empty. Claire, the clones, and the prion protein all vanished through some hidden exit he'd never known existed. Thomas staggered back, adrenaline draining from his system. His radio crackled with voices. Mills, awake now, coordinating with emergency services. The airport was coming back to life, people confused but largely unharmed. But as he made his way back toward the main terminal with Rex at his side, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that this was exactly what Claire had planned all along. The prion protein, the mask, the revelation of her survival, all of it calculated to accomplish something he couldn't yet see. As daylight streamed through the terminal windows, illuminating travelers reuniting with loved ones and security teams sweeping for remaining devices, Thomas found the third Elliot, the one who had helped reverse the compound, waiting near gate C-14. "Is it really over?" Thomas asked. Elliot, too, shook his head slowly. "My mother always has contingency plans. This was just the first city. Just the first test." "Which one are you? Which version?" "I'm the original," he replied quietly. "Her actual son, before she started making improvements. I still have my conscience." Thomas looked out at the awakening airport, at people stumbling to their feet, embracing, crying, checking phones. All unaware of how close they'd come to never waking again. "She'll try again, won't she?" "Yes," Elliot nodded. "But next time, we'll be ready." Thomas felt the weight of the badge on his chest, the responsibility he'd carried for 17 years. But now it felt different. Heavier. Personal. "Where will she go?" he asked. Elliot turned toward the massive departure board, where hundreds of destinations glowed in bright letters. Chicago, Los Angeles, London, Tokyo, Sydney. A web of connections spanning the globe. "Everywhere," he said simply. The morning sun broke fully through the clouds, casting long shadows across the terminal floor. Thomas looked down at Rex, faithful and alert as ever, then back at the security footage showing passengers awakening throughout the airport. Today, they had saved these lives. But somewhere in another city, at another gate, in another suitcase, Claire's plan was already unfolding. And Thomas knew with absolute certainty that he would follow her to the ends of the earth, not out of love, but to stop what she had become. The hunt for his wife had just begun. If this story touched something deep inside you, that fear of losing someone you love or the courage to face impossible truths, then take a moment to join our community. Hit like to let us know this story resonated, subscribe to never miss the next chapter in Officer Thomas's journey, and share this video with someone who appreciates that thin line between mystery and truth. In the comments below, tell us, what would you have done if you discovered someone you mourned was alive but changed beyond recognition? Your thoughts might just shape where this story goes next.